So, today the topic for the Wisdom Talk is a continuation of a talk I started, I think, back on the 5th of April. At the moment we are working our way through a series of Buddhist teachings derived from something called the Mangala Sutta, which means the sutta about blessings in life, and there are a total of 38 of those blessings. But the idea of these blessings is that they are like virtues or character qualities which, if we can integrate them into our habits, then by starting with the more basic ones, they will lead to gradually more esoteric ones in our lives. So wherever you start on the staircase, it will lead one step at a time, gradually further upwards on the staircase, towards eventually enlightenment. And at the moment we just made a start on a subsection of these blessings, which is to do with family harmony, and especially as we are in the period of the Thai New Year, which is a time for expressing gratitude to parents, elders and betters, and even with Mother's Day coming up in a couple of weeks' time, then it's probably appropriate to look at how we can express our gratitude and cherish our parents. Last time I did make a start on this topic, and the things I talked about were mainly justifying a sense of a debt of gratitude which we have towards our parents, not just for the way they brought us up, but within the Buddhist perspective, also having brought us into the world at all as healthy human beings able to do so many good things with our lives. And today we continue by looking at ways in which it's recommended that we can cherish our parents or express our gratitude to our parents according to the things which we find in the Buddhist scriptures. So, having realized the debt of gratitude that we have towards our parents, to actually repay that debt of gratitude, sometimes it's not obvious to know how exactly to go about that. But much of the logic of what's sometimes known as filial piety revolves around the sort of unconditional nature of the relationship between a parent and their child. So there's once a man who, together with his brothers and sisters, had been looking after their old mother throughout a constant period of 2 years and nursing her and paying for her to have kidney dialysis at a monthly cost of thousands of dollars. So at this point you can thank your lucky stars for things like the NHS, because you don't have to make decisions like this. So such a cost is definitely quite difficult for all the brothers and sisters to bear. But if they could not pay that thousands of dollars, then their mother would surely pass away. Because the mother was also suffering from mental disease, as soon as she was strong enough after she had had dialysis, then she would complain continuously and disturb them all night long. So, looking after the mother was a considerable ordeal for the sons and daughters. And at the end of these 2 years, the thought occurred for all of the children that maybe 2 years was enough to repay their debt of gratitude to their mother. What do you reckon about their logic? 2 years? Call it quits? In actual fact, if the mother had thought the same thing about her children when they were sick and needed her attention when they were growing up, give them 2 years and then that's enough, then none of them would have made it either. So this underlines the sort of unconditional nature that whatever it takes, that's what you have to do. Just as the parents thought that about their children, then that's what the children need to think about their parents when it comes to their turn to look to their children for support in their old age. So, usually duty of care is not expressed as a length of time. Because if you ask how long, then the answer is always going to be however long it takes. But within Buddhism, it's sometimes expressed in terms of 5 different ways in which you can care for your parents. And this brings us to a teaching which you may have heard about from the scriptures called the Sigalovada Sutta, the Discourse to Sigala. And in that we have some instructions or guidance for how to repay that debt of gratitude to our parents in order to alleviate the sort of worries which aging parents tend to have when they get to the latter stages of their lives. So, thinking about how you have been supported by the parents when you were younger, the first of these is, as they have supported me, then so shall I support them. Because parents, of course, are afraid of being abandoned in their old age. A second way is to carry on the parents' life work, assuming, of course, that the work they've been doing is something wholesome, not doing something like running the mafia. It's a duty which helps us to cultivate patience and responsibility and knowledge and ability, and it alleviates the parents' fear that their legacy will die with them. Yeah. Third way is to care for parents, is to keep up the honor and traditions of the family. Hopefully, again, good ones. For example, some families have a tradition that if you pass a beggar on the street, then you should never pass them by without giving them something. And in which case, the children ought to carry on the tradition, seeing the value of that. And it will, again, alleviate the parents' fear that the good name of the family will be lost after they're gone. Fourth way is to make yourself worthy of the family legacy. Sometimes it's the only thing which sons and daughters think about, unfortunately. But if you think about the thoughts of sons and daughters who might seem like a sensible prospect for receiving that legacy from their parents, then no parent in their right mind would want to pass on their inheritance to a child who is irresponsible, especially in the way they're spending, especially if they suffer from addictions of various sorts. So part of making oneself worthy of that inheritance would be to make sure that you are worthy in the parents' eyes, and that will help the parents to be alleviated of the fear that their family wealth will be frittered away once they're gone. And lastly, all the ones we've been talking about up to now, we're talking about up to the time of the parent's death, but in fact the duties to one's parents even go beyond death, to include making offerings, dedicating merit to one's parents after they have passed on. You understand what I mean by dedicating merit? Can you explain it? Well, there's a belief that once a person has passed away, in Buddhism, it's not the end of the story. So they're still there, but like in another dimension or whatever, but still incommunicado with us. So, although we cannot see them, we cannot speak to them, but we can share the goodness of things that we still do as a person still alive in this world, do good deeds in their name and dedicate that merit, often by pouring water, making the intention that they receive a share of the goodness that we cultivate on any particular occasion. And this would be called the dedication of merit. So it doesn't just mean organizing a lavish funeral or paying one's last respects, but specifically to do good deeds in the name of the parent who has passed away, not just during the funeral, but also regularly thereafterwards. And from what I've noticed from Thai and Sri Lankan Buddhists, family tends to congregate at the temple once a year to remember a late parent and to dedicate merit, at the very least. And other more diligent ones might do the same every full moon day by chanting of the Dhammaniyama Sutta in the loved one's name. And this will help those who outlive their parents to continue to cultivate right view and responsibility even after their parents are gone. In addition to, it will alleviate the parents' fear that there will be no one to do the funeral rites for them to dedicate merit after they're gone. And finally, I should point out that this advice in the Sigalabhata Sutta should ideally come as part of a reciprocal relationship. So you've got 5 things which you should do for your parents, but there are also 5 things the parents ought to have done for their children too, which I will come to next time around. Okay, so it's not like one-sided, but it's part of a reciprocal relationship between the parents doing their duty, doing what's needed for their children, and children doing what's needed for their parents. In Buddhism, they go into quite a lot of detail about filial piety and how much sense of cherishing parents, or the comparison between the virtues of the parents' generation and our generation, is something which Buddhists spend time thinking about. And in general, you can categorize our generation into 3 types: those whose virtue exceed that of their parents, who are known as abhijataputta, so the ones who bring more prosperity to the family through their good deeds than during the time of their parents. Slightly less noble than that would be those who bring the same level of prosperity or good deeds to their generation as was seen in the parent generation, which are known as anujataputta. And the final one, the least highly esteemed of all, are those for where the virtues or the prosperity of the parents' generation has somehow been lost in our generation because our level of goodness is less than our parents. And the one to look for would be, we do good by our parents and we do even better than they managed to do during their life, is what we would hope and aim for. So the practicality. You've had our 5 duties, but what does this actually mean in practice? When parents are still alive, we might help them out with their daily chores, look after them when they're old, make sure they're well fed, and take care of them when they're sick. If they still have debts when they're in their old age, then we might try to clear those debts before they die, so they don't have that sort of thing to worry about on their deathbed. Appropriate ways to serve a parent might be making their life more convenient. For example, taking them to get fitted with a proper walking stick, for example, if they're having difficulty walking. But it also continues after they have passed away. When they passed away, we can organize their funeral and habitually dedicate merit for them. And the practicality of looking after parents when they are still alive boils down to honoring and protecting them. It sounds a bit like the 4th commandment. The sort of thing might count as honoring our parents might be gifts to them, things like clothing, accommodation, medicine. Sometimes we might give a gift to our parents, not out of necessity, but out of respect. Yeah. And sometimes out of their goodwill for us. Aged parents might seem fussy or critical because they have got a lot more life experience than we have. But sometimes that fussiness is not all in our imagination, but nevertheless, out of respect, then we need to be particularly tolerant of their eccentricities and keep a sense of cheerfulness in spite of that. Some old people have diminished strength in every way except for their mouth, which remains in good working order. So we need to be patient with old folks because they will tend to be quite mouthy. But if we are patient with them, we can probably learn quite a lot from their experience at the same time. And if there are potentially irritating things that might sort of set off those old folks in a negative way, then we should try to perhaps protect them from those things that might annoy them or tire them. If we can take those sort of burdens on ourselves instead, then it will help them to have serenity in their final years. Everything I've mentioned so far has been fairly material in ways of looking after parents or repaying a debt of gratitude to parents. Nonetheless, we should heed the advice of the Buddha that it's very hard to ever repay all the goodness which the parents have done for us in material ways. A much more substantial way to repay a debt of gratitude to parents which would reach beyond the grave, would be to give spiritual support to them, encouraging them to do any wholesome deeds, especially in the final years of their lives, to prepare them to face death without fear. Some parents might be already quite earnest practitioners of Buddhist merit-making, in which case all we have to do is facilitate what they're already doing. But some who might be reckless in their senior years, it might be a great merit for us as a son or daughter to inspire them to do slightly more good deeds than before, and nurture them to be, let's say, more generous, or keep the precepts, or listen to spiritual teachings. If they don't have the means to go to the temple to hear the teachings, we might offer them transport, that sort of thing. But these days there are many spiritual books and audio channels they can derive quite a lot of uplift and inspiration from. If you have a chance to teach them meditation can be a particular comfort to those who are in their final years. And sometimes in the East it's a tradition for dutiful sons to ordain as a monk for a time to repay a debt of gratitude to their parents as well. Sometimes you don't need to wait until they're old to do that. Often at the age of 20, sons in Thai society will do that already. Because the sponsor of the ordination ceremony gets half of the merit accumulated to the one who ordains. And you know how much merit comes from an ordination? You didn't think you could count it up, right? Well, it's counted in rather a rough way, okay? But it's said that from the merits of ordination, the person who ordains will not fall into the nether realms for 32 aeons. Yeah? So the one who organizes the ordination ceremony will get a half of that. So for 16 aeons, they will not fall into the nether realms. Yeah? So it's worth doing that for the parents' sake, if they're the organizers. Some old folks are only interested in how many grandchildren they might have, but sometimes it's not really down to that, especially if the grandchildren all turn out to be troublemakers. So whether they end up with 1 heir or 100 is not the same thing as preserving the family legacy. In fact, the goodness of one's parents is better announced to the world if their goodness shines through 1 or 2 of their family members. And another way to make the goodness of parents known to the world, to announce that to the world, is the Thai tradition of having what's known as funeral books, where at the funeral ceremony a book is published in time for that, of all the good things which that the deceased has done up until the time of their death. I don't think they have that in other countries that I've seen anyway. Yeah. So even the Buddha himself was quite a good example of caring for his parents and his family. In this connection, he cared for his own parents, even though he was a monk and had a sort of religion to lead. He devoted considerable time and effort to this. His mother passed away 7 days after he was born. You knew that, right? So she was no longer in this world, but she was in one of the heaven realms. So the scriptures say that he actually spent 3 months in that heaven realm, passing on teachings to her in order to repay his debt of gratitude to his mother. As for his father, he had the chance to ordain and become enlightened before he was passed away. And although before renouncing the royal palace, the Buddha had a son called Rahula. In this picture, you can see Rahula coming to the Buddha to ask for his legacy. So what sort of legacy did he have to give, having renounced the palace and royalty and all that sort of thing? Nothing much left to give, right? But he had his spiritual legacy. So he allowed his son to be the youngest monk to ordain, what's known as a novice monk, even from the age of 7, and was able to go on to become enlightened in the same way. That's the best thing he could give to his son in this particular case. Not all people are fortunate enough to come from a happy family, and like I said, it's not a one-sided thing where you just keep on being nice to your parents when it's all going into a big hole somewhere, with parents having done nothing to deserve that. And if that is the case, even though we said in the last installment of this talk that we owe our parents even for having been born at all, but from the many people where parents have failed to live up to their responsibilities, especially when in contemporary society there has been what's been termed a collapse of parenting. There are some exceptional cases where children have been so mistreated at the hands of their parents that they find it near impossible to imagine anything good about their parents at all. And in the case of abuse of any sort at their parents' hands, it's important to make a separation between the good things parents have done for one and the bad. And we should still try to repay our debt of gratitude for any good things we have received from our parents, nonetheless. Sometimes, because the good and bad things don't cancel each other out. Sometimes, let's say you have a parent who's a gambler, maybe it wouldn't be money which you wanted to give them. But maybe you'd find another more foolproof way of helping your parents. If your parents are incarcerated, then go and visit them. Don't just sort of write them off because of how their life has ended up, because they're still your parents. And giving support sometimes may need to be cautious, but we should still give support where we can, because parents have that connection with us which we need to honor and somehow celebrate, however tenuous it may be. I have a story to finish off with today, and it's a story that goes back to ancient India. And it's a story of how the Buddha helped an old man, a Brahmin, who had been abandoned in his old age by his sons after the sons have been married off. So, in the city of Savatthi, there used to be a Brahmin who was extremely rich. So he started out quite rich. And he had 4 sons, and when they got married, he gave them each a share of his wealth. And later, he gave away half of his remaining property to them too. Later, after his wife died, the Brahmin's sons came back to him and looked after him with loving affection. And as time went by, somehow they influenced him to give away all the remaining half of his property as well, leaving him penniless. And he didn't worry too much about this because he thought that his sons would look after him. So, having been reduced to nothing, he went first of all to the house of his eldest son, and he stayed there. But after a few days, the daughter-in-law came along and dropped a hint. Did you give extra inheritance to us, or don't you know the way to the house of any of your other sons? So in other words, she's giving him the brush off. So hearing this, the Brahmin felt rather ashamed and embarrassed, and he left the eldest son's house and went to the house of the second son. And the same remarks were eventually made by the wife there, and he went to the third son and eventually the younger son. And after the younger son treated him in the same way, he was basically out on the street. So he's left destitute with a walking stick and a begging bowl, and he went to the Buddha for protection and advice. So, ended up in the temple, as it were. So at the monastery, the Brahmin told the Buddha how his sons had mistreated him. So the Buddha taught him some verses and advised him to go and recite them wherever there was a large gathering of people. And the verses went something like this. My 4 foolish sons are like ogres. They call me father, father, but the words only come out of their mouths and not from their hearts. They are deceitful and scheming. Taking the advice of their wives, they have driven me out of their homes. So now I've been reduced to begging. These sons are of less service to me than this walking stick. So when the appointed day came for the Brahmins of Savatthi to hold their meeting, the Brahmin knew that his sons would be at the meeting too. So, at the time there was a law in India that it's punishable to ill-treat a parent or to not support or look after them. So, many people in the crowd heard what the old man said, and they went and became wild with rage for the ungrateful sons and how they'd treated their father, and they berated him for neglecting their father. So only then did the sons realize the big mistake that they'd made, and they knelt down at the feet of their father and asked for forgiveness. And they promised that from that day forth they would look after him properly, and they would respect, love, and honor him. And they also warned their wives to look after their father as well. So each of the sons gave proper food and clothing now to the Brahmin, who was able to recover his health again. And so each day he received 4 trays of food, so 1 from each son, and he was able to give 2 of the 4 trays to the monastic community and to keep the other 2 for himself. So one day the eldest son invited the monastic community to his house for alms food, and after the meal the Buddha gave a discourse on the spiritual teachings, spiritual benefits of cherishing one's parents. And this whole incident was related to a past life story of an elephant known as Dharnapala, who also displayed filial piety. But that's a story for another day. So for today, if those of you who have just discovered meditation today, I would like to say that one good meditation is good, but the ideal thing is to practice regularly. And if it's at all possible for you to build meditation into your daily schedule at home, then that will serve you best, especially if you can start out with perhaps 20 minutes of meditation a day, maybe choosing a time, first thing in the morning, maybe last thing at night, or at a convenient time of the day, and trying to build that into your daily schedule. So, relax your body, relax your mind, focus at your center, use some Marahang to clear your mind. And if you do that every day, then it will become easier day by day. You might have good days and bad days, but on average, the trend will be for improvement in the quality of your meditation as time goes on. Apart from that, to support you in your meditation practice, in case you have forgotten what the technique is, there's also a free Mind Gem app which you can download onto your mobile phone, which helps to give you an audio guidance from teaching monks in our tradition, and you can set the length of time you want to meditate for on that as well. Here we have meditation classes on Tuesday evenings and Thursday evenings. The meditation on the Tuesday is usually a little bit shorter, but otherwise they follow the same format. And every Saturday we also have online meditation teachings via Zoom, which you can tune into between 7 and 8 in case it's more convenient for you to meditate from the comfort of your home. And the Zoom channel which you need for that is the same as this one, 9151 that you can see there. And once a month on the full moon day, we also have a special activity, both online and this month also in person, for anyone who would like to come along on the Saturday. It will be, again, between 7 and 8:30. The full moon meditation's theme this time is the Day of Gratitude, which is in the spirit of the Thai New Year celebrations, which we have been doing since last Sunday. Some of you joined that as well. For those who are thinking about 32 aeons without visiting the nether realms, you might be interested in the European ordination program, which is planned to take place this year after 2 years away from it, throughout the month of June, or for the first 2 weeks of June if you can't manage the whole month. And the present plan is to organize that all together for the European branches in Denmark, which is a new venue which we haven't used before. The next weekend retreat coming up here should be between the 8th and 10th of July. And at the moment we are also looking into alternative venues, possibly retreat centers near here for those who've been on many retreats in this particular place already. You might be excited to have a change of scene to discover meditation in somewhere apart from this temple. Yes, so we'll keep you updated on developments there.